at everyone here. They're going crazy for you. And I know that the people have been watching you, your audition, and people love you. It's amazing.
In the summer of 2023, millions of viewers settled in front of their televisions expecting another unforgettable episode of America's Got Talent. They anticipated dazzling magic tricks, breathtaking dance routines, and singers hoping to capture a few fleeting moments of applause. What they did not expect was that one of the night's quietest contestants would leave the deepest impression of all. A middle-aged man walked onto the stage wearing simple clothes. There was nothing extravagant about him. No dramatic entrance. No carefully rehearsed speech. He looked nervous, almost uncomfortable beneath the bright stage lights. When asked what he did for a living, his answer was astonishingly ordinary. "I'm a fisherman from the Philippines." For a brief moment, the audience smiled politely. They had heard countless stories before. Yet within minutes, that same audience would rise to its feet, cheering for a man whose greatest performances had never happened on a stage at all. They had happened on the open sea, where the only audience was the wind, the waves, and a rising sun. How does someone travel from a weathered fishing boat to one of the biggest entertainment stages in the world? How does a voice hidden by poverty suddenly become impossible to ignore? More importantly, what does success truly mean when the world finally notices you after decades of believing it never would? This isn't simply the story of a talented singer. It is the story of patience, of sacrifice, of quiet perseverance that continued long after most people would have surrendered. Because long before the standing ovations, before the viral videos, before judges struggled to find words after hearing him sing, Roland Abante lived a life defined by hard work rather than applause. His mornings didn't begin with rehearsals. They began before sunrise. Long before most of the town awoke, Roland was already preparing for another day at sea. Fishing wasn't a hobby passed down through generations. It was survival, paid for food. It helped support family. It represented responsibility more than adventure. Growing up in the coastal municipality of Santander in Cebu, the ocean became both his classroom and his workplace. The sea taught discipline in ways no textbook ever could. Calm waters could suddenly become dangerous. Good catches could disappear without warning. Every day demanded patience, resilience, and faith that tomorrow might be better than today. Those lessons would eventually shape far more than his career as a fisherman. They would shape the man behind the microphone. Life in Roland's community was simple, but it was rarely easy. Families worked hard for every meal. Luxury wasn't something children dreamed about because it hardly existed around them. Success was measured differently. Having enough food on the table. Returning home safely from the sea. Watching your children receive an education that you never had. Music wasn't considered a career. It was something people enjoyed during celebrations. Local festivals, family gatherings, church services, neighborhood karaoke nights. For Roland, however, music slowly became something much more personal. It became hope. Whenever work ended and responsibilities allowed, he found opportunities to sing. There were no expensive recording studios waiting for him. No professional vocal coaches correcting every note. His classroom was experience itself. Sometimes he sang while helping friends. Sometimes he sang during community events. Sometimes he simply sang because singing made difficult days feel a little lighter. Those who heard him often reacted with surprise. His voice carried an emotional weight that couldn't be explained by technical training alone. It sounded lived in. Honest. Every lyric felt connected to someone who understood disappointment, responsibility, and quiet endurance. Yet talent alone rarely changes a person's life, especially when survival comes first. Like countless gifted individuals around the world, Roland found himself balancing dreams with reality. Fishing remained his primary source of income. When extra work appeared, he accepted it. Driving, small jobs around town, anything that helped support the household. The dream of becoming a professional singer often had to wait until after the bills were paid. There were moments when pursuing music seemed unrealistic. Years passed. Opportunities came and disappeared. People admired his voice, but admiration doesn't always create opportunity. Many talented people hear the same encouragement throughout their lives. You should be famous. You deserve a bigger stage. You have an incredible gift. Kind words can inspire, but they don't guarantee change. Roland understood this better than most. Instead of becoming bitter, he kept moving forward. Not because success seemed likely, because singing had become part of who he was. Behind every remarkable journey is usually someone who refuses to stop believing. For Roland, that person was his wife, Genevieve. While others viewed music as an uncertain dream, she saw something different. She saw purpose. She recognized how deeply singing was connected to the man she loved. During difficult financial periods, when practical concerns naturally overshadowed distant ambitions, she continued encouraging him to keep performing whenever opportunities appeared. Support like that often goes unnoticed. Audiences celebrate the performer standing beneath bright lights. Rarely do they see the family quietly carrying emotional burdens behind the scenes. Every performance required sacrifice from both of them. Time, money, energy, faith. There were evenings when Roland returned home exhausted after working all day, only to leave again for another small singing engagement. Sometimes payment was little more than transportation, food, or a modest amount that barely covered expenses. Still, he accepted, not because the reward was great, because every performance kept the dream alive. Little by little, people across neighboring communities began recognizing his name. He became known as the fisherman with the extraordinary voice. Local audiences looked forward to hearing him perform at celebrations. Community competitions became opportunities not just to win, but to remind himself that his gift still mattered. Yet beyond those familiar faces, the wider world remained unaware that one of its most powerful voices was quietly waiting in a small Philippine town. Years continued passing. Technology transformed how people discovered talent. Social media allowed unknown artists to reach audiences they never imagined. Television competitions created overnight stars. Entire careers could begin with one unforgettable performance. But Roland wasn't chasing internet fame. He was simply living his life, working, providing, singing whenever he could. Without realizing it, he was preparing for a moment that would eventually change everything. Sometimes the biggest turning points arrive without warning. Not through elaborate plans, not through powerful connections, but through one ordinary day that suddenly becomes extraordinary. Soon, Roland would step onto a national stage for the first time, testing whether decades of quiet determination could finally open a door that had remained closed for most of his life. And although that opportunity wouldn't immediately transform his future, it would prove something even more important. His voice belonged on far bigger stages than he had ever dared imagine. The first opportunity arrived when Roland entered one of the Philippines' biggest televised singing competitions. For someone who had spent years performing in barangay celebrations, local fiestas, and modest community events, stepping onto a national stage felt almost unreal. Around him stood contestants who appeared far more prepared. Many had formal vocal training, professional experience, and the confidence that comes from growing up with opportunities Roland had never known. He walked into the competition carrying none of those advantages. What he carried instead was a lifetime of experience that couldn't be taught in any music school. When the music began, something remarkable happened. His voice didn't sound manufactured. It wasn't polished to perfection or shaped by years inside expensive recording studios. It carried rough edges that made every lyric believable. Each note reflected years of waking before dawn, working beneath an unforgiving sun, and refusing to let difficult circumstances silence a dream. By the time he finished singing, judges and audiences had witnessed something unforgettable. He earned praise. He gained new supporters. People started talking about the fisherman whose voice seemed capable of stopping conversations the moment he opened his mouth. For a brief period, it looked as though his life might finally change forever. Television appearances followed. More invitations arrived. Musicians began noticing him. Fans shared clips of his performances online, introducing his music to viewers who had never heard his name before. It seemed as though years of quiet determination were finally beginning to pay off. But success has a way of testing people just when they believe they've reached solid ground. Although Roland impressed audiences, the competition ended sooner than he had hoped. The momentum faded. Television cameras moved on to new contestants. The entertainment industry, always searching for its next headline, quickly shifted its attention elsewhere. For many people, that moment would have marked the end of the dream. Roland simply went back to work. The fishing boat was still waiting. Bills still needed paying. His family still depended on him. The applause had disappeared, but responsibility had not. It is often said that true character is revealed not when life rewards us, but when it asks us to begin again. Roland began again. He continued singing wherever invitations appeared. Weddings, community programs, restaurants, charity events. Small stages that offered little money but another opportunity to share his gift. Those audiences may have been smaller than television viewers, but he treated every performance with the same sincerity. Perhaps that was the secret. He never sang differently because the crowd was larger. He sang because music had become part of his identity. Years passed quietly. The world kept moving. Technology changed. Social media became one of the most powerful forces in entertainment, capable of transforming unknown artists into international sensations overnight. Viral videos created careers that traditional television never could. Still, Roland wasn't chasing algorithms. He wasn't creating content designed to attract millions of views. He was simply living his life. Then came a night that seemed completely ordinary. A local gathering. Plastic chairs arranged beneath simple decorations. Neighbors talking among themselves. Children running around. A karaoke machine sitting near the front. Nothing about the evening suggested history was about to be made. Roland stepped forward and chose a song that demanded extraordinary vocal control. As he began to sing, conversations slowly faded. Phones that had been resting inside pockets suddenly appeared. Someone pressed record. It lasted only a few minutes. No expensive cameras. No dramatic lighting. No professional editing. Just an ordinary smartphone capturing an extraordinary voice. The video spread faster than anyone expected. Friends shared it. Then strangers. Then entire communities. Within days, thousands had watched it. Soon it became hundreds of thousands. Then millions. People from across the Philippines began asking the same question. How had a singer like this remained hidden for so long? Comments poured in from overseas. Filipinos living in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe proudly shared the clip with family and friends. Music lovers who couldn't understand every word still understood every emotion. The performance crossed borders because genuine feeling rarely requires translation. Every new share introduced Roland to another audience. Every new audience created another opportunity. Then something almost impossible happened. A message arrived that seemed too unbelievable to be real. It was an invitation connected to America's Got Talent. At first, Roland struggled to believe it. Why would one of the biggest television shows in the world be interested in a fisherman from a small Philippine town? He wondered whether someone was playing a joke. Could a simple viral video really reach producers on the other side of the world? As the reality slowly became clear, excitement was quickly replaced by uncertainty. There were practical questions that suddenly became impossible to ignore. How would he travel? How would he afford the journey? Would his English be good enough? Would audiences understand him? Would judges compare him with singers who had spent years receiving professional coaching? Perhaps the biggest question of all lingered quietly in his mind. Did he truly belong on a stage like that? Self-doubt has ended more dreams than failure ever has. Roland knew exactly what doubt sounded like because he had lived beside it for decades. Yet once again, someone reminded him why he could not allow fear to decide his future. Genevieve never questioned whether he should accept the opportunity. She reminded him of every difficult morning he had endured, every performance he had accepted despite receiving almost nothing in return. Every year he continued believing when believing became difficult. This opportunity, she insisted, had not appeared by accident. It was the result of everything that had come before. Friends and supporters gathered together to help however they could. Travel expenses were not easy to manage, but those who believed in Roland understood that opportunities like this rarely come twice. Eventually, the impossible became reality. For the first time in his life, Roland boarded an international flight. As the aircraft climbed above the clouds, he looked through the window at the ocean stretching far below. Somewhere beyond that endless horizon lay the fishing grounds that had shaped his entire life. They had provided food, discipline, and humility. Now they were fading into the distance as he traveled toward a future he could scarcely imagine. Waiting for him was Los Angeles, a city famous for creating stars, a stage watched by millions, judges whose decisions could change lives in a single evening. Roland carried no guarantee of success. He carried no promise of victory. What he carried instead was something far more powerful: a lifetime of perseverance, the unwavering support of his family, and a voice forged not in luxury but through years of hardship, faith, and quiet determination. Within days, he would walk onto one of the most famous stages in the world. The fisherman who had spent decades singing to the sea was about to discover whether the world was finally ready to listen.